Hello everybody, this is Timothy here. We are here for the final part 5 of my Eternal Masters Draft Archetype review. We're going to be looking at white, blue, and green, red today, and I will preface this by saying that I think these are probably the two best combinations to go into on Friday because they seem to be the most consistent. They seem to be archetypes that you can draft very easily and have a lot of support. And while people are going to be messing around, people who don't know the set very well, people who didn't look at it very well, are going to struggle to put together a deck and put together a really consistent deck. You can draft these tried and true archetypes that show up in many formats. You'll notice them as soon as we get into them. So without further ado, we will start with white-blue, which is your traditional flyer deck. As far back as I can remember, white-blue is typically a flyer archetype. Where you're looking to race your opponent often, beating in with creatures they can't block, and hopefully taking them out before they can take you out. White-blue usually has good matchups and bad matchups. The good matchups are the ones where your opponent's dirtling around for a while, trying to do some long game shenanigans, and you can just beat them down with efficient creatures they can't deal with. The bad matchups are usually very quick decks, so red decks and green decks tend to do very well. Creatures with a reach are a big problem, and I think there are only two in this format, but they take down flyers pretty well. But typically white-blue is a very good archetype for almost every format, since flyers will just get there against a lot of people. Some decks just aren't prepared to deal with the massive flyers. But anyway, your archetype staples here. Thunderclap Wurn is back from Origins, very recent printing, but it is a flying lord and it has flash. It's actually fantastic. You can use it as a combat trick to give all of your creatures with flying a permanent +1/+1 boost. Not to mention that it's a decent creature on its own. 2/3 flyer with flash as a vanilla creature would be fine. This one's just altogether fantastic. You also see a lot of other support in Warden of Evos Island Sprite Noble, making your flyers cost 1 less to cast and giving your flyers a pump as well, respectively. So you'll notice a lot of support at the common and uncommon level. Warden of Evos Isle is a common, and it's a very good card for this type of archetype, being a flyer itself and supporting other flyers. Sprite Noble just seems like an altogether fantastic card that I'd be looking to draft very highly if I knew I wanted to go into white-blue. You will notice, I think, a lot of the support here for flyers is at the uncommon level. So to have a really, really strong deck, not just a consistent deck, but a strong deck, a 3/0 type deck, you do need to prioritize some of these uncommons over some of your rares, as you probably won't likely see cards like Thunderclap Wurn and Sprite Noble go back. One thing I do like about these kind of archetype staples here is that there should be clear signs that the archetype is open. If you're seeing a really late Thunderclap Wurn, maybe 5th, 6th pick in a pack, it's probably a safe bet to say that nobody's in white-blue flyers at the moment, and it'd be a safe bet to pick it up and try to move towards that archetype. Warden of Evos Isle, not so much, as is a fine card, but not one that would push you into flyers. And Sprite Noble being along the same lines as Thunderclap Wurn, a flying lord that lets you know blue flyers are open, if not blue-white flyers. So what are you looking to take here? Obviously, this is about as straightforward as it gets. You're looking to take cards that fly or cards that make other things fly. So on the left side, you'll see the Flying Matters card. Soul Catcher is a below-curve flyer that actually gets bigger when your other flyers die. So if your deck is made up of 80-90% flyers, Soul Catcher can get big over the course of a game. Wonder gives all of your non-flyers flying. It's a little redundant if your whole deck already has flying, and you could actually probably cut it because a 4-mana 2/2 is not fantastic. But if you're looking to fill out your deck with a couple non-flying creatures, Wonder does wonders. Yeah, I went there. Get over it. Welkin Guide, a little bit of a not the biggest baddest creature in the air, but something that can jump your other creatures, much like Wonder, for a one-time boost, and can let you get in there with some of your ground creatures, while also providing a body on its own. Not a bad card at all. One card I left off of here as Squadron Hawk. Squadron Hawk does double time or quadruple time in this sort of deck where you're looking to get a bunch of flyers out and you're looking to pump them over the course of the game and just get in there with small pecks towards your opponent's 20 life and take them out before they can take you out. Squadron Hawk, the more you can pick up, the better it makes this archetype. I would not qualm about having as many Squadron Hawks as I possibly could in this archetype. One thing you'll notice, there are a lot of flyers that don't particularly do much. They're just vanilla creatures. Like Sarah Angel is a vigilant vanilla creature for the most part. Maestro Charger and Phantom Monster are good on-curve creatures, but they're efficient for their costs. They come down a turn earlier than they normally would. Mistral Charger being, an ideal 2-drop flyer, Phantom Monster being actually a very good 4-drop creature. A Hill Giant with flying is not bad at all, and Sarah Angel probably dominates the skies in this format. You'll notice, if you look through all of these videos and you've looked through the spoiler yourself, creatures are generally small in this format. There aren't a lot of huge things hulking around outside of rarity, rare and mythic cards. So having efficient flyers probably puts you ahead of the curve here, and there are good hits on every point of the curve for the flyers, with your key cards being around the 3 mana cost and your efficient kind of curve fillers being around the lower end and the higher end. So Maestro Charger, Sarah Angel, Phantom Monster. I obviously didn't sit here and put every single flyer on this list, but there aren't too many flyers that are just straight up bad. In fact, most of the flyers would fit this deck as far as blue and white cards go. The rares you're looking for, Serendib, Ifrit, Karmic Guide, and Brago. It's not like their particular effects or their particular strategies do anything special so much as they are just blue-white flyers that fit in this deck, and they're all good cards in their own right. Serendib Ifrit is actually a very, very strong card. The 1 damage to you is chump change compared to the 3+ damage you're going to be doing with it to your opponent, and it just comes down way, way earlier than it should for its power and toughness. It's hard to get rid of, too, being a 4 toughness creature. Karmic Guide, I've already mentioned this in the white-black video, but Karmic Guide's just a solid altogether, almost bomb rare, I would say. If you can play it on curve and bring something back with it, you don't even have to pay the echo cost for it to be good, but if you do, it just has extra value as a 2/2 flyer on its own that reanimates another creature and has protection from black tacked onto it. You do have to pay the echo cost if you want to, but small price to pay, I think, to get back your best creature from your graveyard. In Brago, the Blinken's not so important in this strategy as much as it is in the black-white version, Splash and Blue for Brago, but Brago is still a flyer. It's a blue-white card, and it's going to fit this deck perfectly. You'll pick it up, definitely. Maze of Ith is just an altogether solid card, fits in pretty much any deck, and you'd probably play it regardless of what you're doing. But the one thing that I like about Maze of Ith in the blue-white flyer deck is, I think I mentioned this in the beginning of this video, that flyer decks usually try to race the opponent. They don't do a lot of blocking because the flyers are going to get in there. If you are in the position where you have to start blocking with your flyers, you're probably going to fall behind and lose the game. So walls like Wall of Omens and Tidal Wave, cards like that can really stem your side of the bleeding while still letting you get in there with the flyers. Maze of Ith is fantastic in this sort of deck, any sort of deck where you're trying to race your opponent, since it essentially locks down your opponent's best creature, and Maze of Ith scales the stronger your opponent's creatures get. If they play something much, much bigger, you can lock that down instead. So it works very well in the white-blue flyer deck, but I'm not saying that it's only suited for the white-blue flyer deck. It's just a solid card in pretty much any deck you can draft it in. Moving on away from white-blue, we have another standard type of archetype here, is the Stompy Beatdown deck in green-red, where you're just looking to beat your opponent's face in as fast and as strongly as possible, often using haste creatures to get in there. You'll notice Bloodbraid Elf is kind of the key giveaway here. One of the first cards spoiled from this set showed us that red-green was very likely going to be a beatdown deck with hasty creatures. We also saw Curd Ape and Flint Hoof Boar, which just kind of furthered this archetype. Very straightforward. Play red and green creatures, make them stronger, be above curve and above what your opponent's doing, and beat them down before they can get going. These 3 cards here, I think, are kind of what ties it together as far as the commons and uncommons go. Bloodbraid Elf, I wouldn't expect to see too many of these go around. It's a card that people would probably pick very highly and start looking to draft green-red because of it. It's the type of card that really pushes you into an archetype. Curd Ape is the type of card that you pick up once you know you're in the archetype, as it only is really good in green-red and not in any other red variant. The same goes for Flint Hoof Boar, as it's only a creature that's good in red-green and gets a lot weaker outside of that archetype. The cards you're looking to draft here, and yes, there are a bunch of cards here, is hasty creatures. You're trying to get in there as early as possible, and you'll notice there are a lot of creatures with haste, in addition to Reckless Charge, which is a very, very efficient spell that gives a creature haste and +3/+0, and has flashback. Very versatile. It is a sorcery, but that's kind of to be expected for the effect you get off of it. Keldon Champion, Centaur Chieftain are efficient haste creatures as well that kind of fit into other strategies too. They are at the uncommon level, so I wouldn't expect to get a lot of them, but if I knew I was playing red-green, I would prioritize these cards very, very highly. Fervent Cathar is a very nice card. Locks down a blocker for the turn while also having haste itself. It's a slightly smaller version of Voldaren Duelist for those of you who have been playing Shadows over Innistrad, and you might have realized Voldaren Duelist is a very strong card. Fervent Cathar is very similar in that regards. Avarax is a very interesting card, a card I'd never seen before Eternal Masters spoilers. It's a creature that comes down with haste. It's a hill giant that costs a little bit more than 4, so it's 5 mana 3/3 with fire breathing. But when it comes down, you actually get to search your deck for another card named Avarax, ensuring that you'll have a threat on the following turn. I don't know how good the card is. 5 mana for a 3/3 seems a little bit weak, but if you're really beaten down and you're trying to put the pressure on, the fact that this draws you another relevant threat seems really nice. And it is a common, so it's not inconceivable that you'll be able to pick up multiples of the card. One thing that green-red really needs, and this is true for pretty much any format that green-red is in, is you need ways to break through. You are going to get a lot of hasty damage in, but if your opponent's able to stabilize, able to get down a huge blocker and stop you from attacking, you might be in trouble. So you need to prioritize cards that are going to let you get through regardless of what your opponents do. Brawn and Rancor are similar in that they give trample to all your creatures. Brawn is a solid creature on its own. When it dies, you get value out of it. And suddenly all your creatures have trample for the rest of the game, which can put your opponent in a very, very miserable spot if they're playing a deck that has lots of tokens or chump blockers, things like that. Rancor makes all of your threats recurrent threats. Every time the creature with Rancor dies, you get Rancor back, and you get to suit up another creature. And Rancor does give trample and a nice little power boost for just 1 mana. Pretty insane card that pops up quite a bit in Modern. And it's definitely justified here. Fits into a bunch of different strategies, and I would be willing to bet that pretty much any green deck is going to pick up Rancor as high as possible. Seismic Stomp, this is the equivalent of Magmatic Chasm, again, for those of you in Shadows over Innistrad land. The type of card that is often not very good, but depending on the format gets really good, much better. So red-green is a staple archetype in Shadows over Innistrad, and Volcanic or Magmatic Chasm is the card that lets you just win games sometimes. The same is true here. Seismic Stomp lets you just push in all of your ground creatures, assuming your opponent doesn't have a lot of flyers. I'm not so sure how good it is. It's the type of card I'll have to test out. And the fact that there's a whole archetype based on flying leads me to believe that it'll be a little bit worse than Magmatic Chasm is. But like I said, it's the type of card that varies depending on the format, and it could be good, it could be bad. I would be looking to pick up at least one for my sideboard if I knew I was in this sort of deck and board it in against decks that don't have a lot of flyers. Sometimes 2 mana to steal a game is definitely worth it. And then anything like Roots. Roots is just a standard card. It stops the thing from blocking, and it locks down a creature. It just lets you get in with your creatures. Anything that's going to let you push past your creatures is something you should be prioritizing in this format. It looks, or in this archetype specifically, I should say. This looks to be a really, really fun archetype, and like I said, red-green is the type of archetype that can often just steal games when a format is new, because people are going to be trying a bunch of weird things. People are going to be pulling a bunch of weird rares and doing weird mana fixing things. Some people are going to be punished for trying to do too many things at once. And if you just draft a consistent red-green deck that can beat your opponent down before they get going, you're going to be well rewarded for it. I would highly recommend red-green going into this format if it's open. Don't force it, but if it's open, definitely look to be drafting it. Another thing about red-green, look at all the freaking rares that fit into this archetype. Giant Soulfuge is the go-to rare here. It's a little bit of an awkward card. It has 1 toughness, so it trades with anything, but against certain decks that aren't playing a lot of creatures, especially like red-blue that's more spell-based, Giant Soulfuge can just get in there. It also has Shroud, so it's hard to interact with. If you can ever get this down and just smash for 4, it probably feels really, really good. Otherwise, there are times I would actually cut it if my opponent's playing a very big token deck or red-white or something like that. I would actually probably cut this from my deck because it just trades too easily with too many things. Maelstrom Wanderer requires a blue splash, but if you've ever read the card or played Commander or done anything that involves Maelstrom Wanderer, you know it's probably worth it. It is an 8-mana card, and I don't think this format's very slow, so it's a little bit of a struggle to get there, but once you get there, it can probably win you the game very easily. Sulfuric Vortex. If you're playing the type of game plan that just wants to race and wants to push in damage, Sulfuric Vortex is going to do the job for you very nicely. Over the course of the game, probably dealing a good 8 damage to each player, but if you can stay above the curve and make sure you're slamming in damage with your Curd Apes and your Flint Hoof Boars and things like that, then Sulfuric Vortex will wrap up the game for you. Green Sun's Zenith and Natural Order kind of fit in the same category here. The fact that there are a lot of green creatures with haste means that these cards go up in value when you're playing red-green because they can actually fetch a creature that's going to be able to attack right away rather than just fetching some big fatty like they normally do. As for haste, you also have Rorik's Bladewing and Sneak Attack. Just letting you drop threats and swing with them immediately. Bladewing is a deceptively strong card. I think people are disappointed to see it because it's not an exciting card, but it is very, very strong. A 6-mana, 6-power haste creature is going to win you the game in just a matter of turns. And assuming you're playing full red-green, you've probably already dealt damage, making Bladewing something like a 2 to 3 turn clock. Sneak Attack turns all of your creatures into threat. It's just a stupid card, but I wouldn't get too hasty, no pun intended, about abusing Sneak Attack since you do sacrifice your creature on the end step, and if you're not winning with it, you're actually setting yourself behind. So don't get too cocky with Sneak Attack and use it every time you can. Use it advantageously and use it strategically. Sylvos Rogue Elemental, I've mentioned this card once before in one of these videos, but it's just a powerful card. If you can get it down and hold up green mana to regenerate it, there are very few ways to deal with it outside of cards like Swords to Plowshares and stuff like that. Just a big beater, already has Trample, fits into this deck very, very nicely, and if you can ever ramp it out early, you are in a very, very good position. So yeah, you'll notice tons of rares that fit into this strategy, making it even more viable, also making it more likely that other people at the table will have a card that fits into it, meaning red-green, I think, will be hard to draft because a lot of people will be looking to draft it. Just my opinion. Let me know what you think. I think it's pretty good. And like I said, I think white, blue, and red, green are very strong here. They're very consistent. They have very defined archetypes that have been tried out in other formats and have usually been very good. So I don't see any reason to think they shouldn't work here too. I could be completely wrong. If you draft Blue Light Flyers and go 0-3, please don't come leaving a comment saying, hey, you said blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, I'm just here for suggestions. At any rate, I thank you guys for watching all of these videos, or watching just one of them if this is the only one you've watched. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share a little bit of information with me. And if you would, like, comment, and subscribe. Especially comment. I'm curious to see what people think about this set. And since we're at the end of this video series, I'm super curious to see, what do you think the best archetype is? Or is there an archetype I missed that's not tied to a 2-color combination? Let me know what you think you're going to be drafting at Eternal Masters. Let me know what you want to open, and let me know how it goes when you come back. Alright, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.